industry for
I'm Richard Monson. I'm with the Utah Motor Board.
Good morning, Keith Heaton with the State of Utah Community Development.
Eddie Shelley with RV Distribution.
Diane Bradshaw with Direct Communications out in Eagle Mountain.
Brett Simmons at Strata. Hey, Brian with Strata.
Alicia Hart with the Governor's Office of Economic Development.
Jack Walkenhurst with All West.
Liz Gavitus with the State Library Division, part of Department of Cultural and Community Engagement.
Oh, wait, and she's the new.
Oh, yes. So thanks to some USBE funding we just received, I am the Digital Access and Education Coordinator. We've created a new program. We're excited about doing a lot of new work in that area. So
Great, thanks. Sorry, Tara.
Hi, Tara Tui with AT&T.
Randy Coffey with InfoWest. We're an ISP out of St. George, Cedar City, Richfield area, and do wireless and fiber.
Glenn Reichert, US Ignite. We do work in connecting the unconnected. We've got a project with the National Science Foundation where we're doing 7 communities across the country. And we're delighted to be supporting what's happening here in Utah as well.
I'm Annalise Segura, and I represent the City of Mill Creek.
Mike Riley, Mid-State Consultants here in Utah.
Paul Murdoch, High Country Net Fiber over in Harriman, and been doing it about 6 years now, and good to be here.
Jeff Egley, I'm with Utah Education and Telehealth Network.
Roger Timmerman with Utopia Fiber.
Kim McKinley with Utopia Fiber.
Trent Banger with Americom Technology.
Douglas Meredith with JSI for Utah Rural Telecom Association.
Mike McCarley with Dell Technologies.
Rob Silverberg, Dell Technologies. I'll be presenting later.
And a couple of our presenters are here, one from California and the other all the way from Arizona. And we have a group. How many do we have virtually attending?
35.
We have 35. So I think this is the largest group. I don't know if it's COVID or just everything that's happening now with obviously broadband. It's a new world now, and welcome to it. I hear though that the supply chains is wreaking havoc, and so we'll see what we can do. Maybe there'll be solutions that we can share with each other. I'm not sure that we have, is Rob Entz online yet? Oh, he is here. So Rob?
Present.
Can you put it to presenter? You have a screen to share or?
I do. You ready to have me just roll?
Yep.
That's great. Thank you, Rebecca. And I'll take just a few minutes. I just need to do a very, very brief introduction. I'm Rob Entz with the Utah Commission on Aging, and very, very happy to be part of this group. When I hear about so much fiber in the room, it does an old man's heart good to hear about that in our technology diet, if you will. Anyway, the Commission on Aging has been around since about 2005 and was originally housed with the division, or the Department of Human Services, is now part of higher ed. We're housed as part of the Center on Aging at the University of Utah. So I want to just share screen a little bit and give you a quick background of how I think we integrate with this group, and maybe take a minute to answer any questions. All right, here we go. I trust you can see my screen, all right?
Not yet.
Oh, not yet? Let's try that again.
That's all right. There you go.
Okay,
There we
good. I
go.
got it.
This is a test of our technology skills, right? Anyway, so the Commission on Aging was originally created by statute to help create a relationship with all of the public policy makers and agencies in the state to prepare for the changing demographic in our society. And it's evolved over time, has had several projects along the way, but the focus right now, at least under my leadership, has been to really get connectivity for older adults in the state and to move forward with the things that we need to do. Well, it's responding quicker than I thought. Here we go. So what we do is we are at the intersection between public policy, research and academia, and community resources. And a couple of years ago, we created a fairly robust website presence that we are now rolling out the next iteration at the end of this month to be the Older Adult Virtual Resource Center for the state in collaboration with the area agencies on aging, Division of Aging Adult Services, and other organizations. We have about 200 different organizations that are involved in some way in one of these sectors with older adult issues, but technology is a driving force in the middle of that. In addition to the website, of course, we have podcasts, social media reach as well. But the purpose of all of this is to address the fact that we have this aging demographic, and in a post-COVID world, the reality is that we all needed to depend on technology at a greater degree than we ever have before. And this was particularly true with telehealth. And now we also have the great opportunities of dealing with people who are not only isolated, rural, chronically ill, or people who just want to take advantage of the many opportunities available to them through virtual resources, because aging is not just about dependency and getting services, but it's about becoming vibrantly involved in arts and entertainment and travel and all those sorts of things. And this is dedicated to help them accomplish that. The issues are the same that we've had for a long time in aging. There's a variety of things that are continuing to impact society, but the number one thing right now that has the greatest risk to our older adults is social isolation. And social isolation impacts our health. It impacts, mental, physical, spiritual well-being. We figure that almost 1 in 5 individuals over age 65 is isolated. And I don't mean isolated physically, but literally isolated by condition. They could be in a group of people and not feel connected because people don't understand them. It could be an extreme like somebody with dementia to somebody who just seems to have lost touch with their sociality and other connectivity issues. One of the things technology can do is help alleviate some of this. It's not a perfect remedy for in-person contact, but it certainly is a way for us to stay in touch with people and to connect with people in meaningful ways. So I indicate there's a lot of things that are still at great risk in our society. We won't go on each one of those today because there are many. But through the lifespan that we all go through, and it does not age dependent, but there are phases we go through being independent, we get interdependent, we create dependencies because of certain needs. Sometimes we go through crisis management, and then sometimes, and eventually we all have end of life decisions we have to make. In every aspect of this, technology plays a role for the individual or for the individual's IT partner. The thing that we're going to really focus on in the commission, and why I think the relationship with this advisory council is very critical. So many of you are really focused on making sure we've got good broadband and interconnectivity throughout the state, and I think that's marvelous. We want to make sure that this is available to older adults regardless of their circumstance, and affordable, and the programs we'll be talking about somewhat today will address some of this. We also want to make sure that we enhance their ability to get devices they're comfortable with, from iPhones to iPads, tablets, CPUs, whatever it may be, and that we provide for them the know-how. We have a hotline that we make available to people to call and help triage their situation to make sure they can navigate resources, not only on our website, but on other critical resources throughout the state, as well as opportunities for entertainment and so on. But if they don't have that expertise, we'll help line them up with an IT advocate and someone who can help train them to use their device, or help them find somebody who can be their partner in utilizing the device. The final piece that's really important for aging in a virtual world is that these individuals know how to use this information and this equipment safely, because older adults are a prime target for fraud and scams. It's been that way, whether it's the US mail, banking systems, whatever, and now IT is another portal that while it has a lot of enriching opportunities, it is also a portal for fraud and scams. So we want to make sure people can use them safely. So that is basically what we hope to accomplish with the relationship. Everybody here is to be a voice for the older adults in our society, in our communities in the state of Utah, to help educate, change behavior, build better and stronger environments, provide services, be accessible to them. So that, Rebecca, is in a nutshell what the Commission on Aging is all about. And I look forward to interacting with all of you in the near future, and I'll be happy to respond. We're always looking for partnering and funding opportunities to expand our work and to complement the services that are out there in the state now. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Nice to meet everybody virtually.
Rob, are there any questions? Anybody like to?
I have two questions.
Okay.
Rob, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Your IT agents that go and help older population with understanding technology, is that a volunteer program, or is that you affiliate with other organizations?
It's absolutely a volunteer program. Everything we drive through the site is not a pay-for-play site. Everything we do is free to the public. Again, we are commissioned by the legislature to do the work, and appointed by the governor to fulfill a purpose. So we think free access is really important to all the resources we pull together. The Volunteer Corps started by helping people train to learn how to use technology for telehealth delivery, specifically with mental health. That is our beginning cadre of folks, which includes some older adults, college-age students, and even some high school students. And we intend to build that work, or that volunteer force over time to be a very complete older adult triage center. So volunteer.
Second question deals with the newly old, the people who are becoming in that group. Are you finding that they have technical skills to use these technologies, or do they? I'm just wondering, the newly retired, are they okay? And most of your training is for the older people, or is it the newly old people that need help too?
It's across the board. I'm preaching to the choir when I say that technology changes very, very rapidly. And there's so many things that people can do on their iPhone through apps and things now that we didn't, imagine, 15 years ago. So I think it's, we have in the field right now an IT survey targeted at the 50+ population. While we know about the broadband reach in the state, what we don't know is the utilization, the barriers and opportunities missed with the older adult population. We'll wrap that survey by the end of July. Right now we're focused on just getting additional response to some of the rural areas, but we already have a critical number to give us statistically relevant information. We'll share that report back with this group, but that will tell us about what people are using it and what age demographics and what geographic areas of the state, what their barriers, what kinds of equipment they're using, and what their wish would be to have additional things. I think it'll be very informative, which will answer specifically that question of at what age group are we needing to focus our attention for training. So at this point, it's like we want to identify the challenge and provide help, or help train somebody who can be their IT partner if they themselves do not want to invest the time and energy, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a child, or a neighbor who can help them navigate some of the technology opportunities.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. So yes, the new old people. You can go on to the Commission on Aging and the survey. I looked it up myself. I think I even took it. So yes, I think the more participants, or share that with them to get that information out.
I appreciate telling them to do that. That's great. Appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, Rob. Now we'll just get you to mute. Again, everyone, make sure you're muted, and we will now, I'm happy to introduce to you Rob Silverberg. He's the CSIO with Digital Communities at Dell Technologies. He's our visitor that came here all the way from
San Francisco, California.
Yeah.
My first business travel post-COVID is to here to meet with you guys.
Yay!
And the one right before COVID, before we all went into shutdown, was Madison, Wisconsin. I remember it well. That's the last trip I took, and then no travel until this meeting today. I will say that I can very much relate to that last speaker because I am the tech support for my parents who are both in their 80s, and they're waiting for me to drive down to help them hook up a new printer. And it's been like a week, and they're starting to bug me about when I can go and help them with their printer. So I can relate to that. Let's see, share the screen. Oops, don't leave meeting. Oh, that's not good. Share. Let's see, is it sharing? No.
That screen on the wall is not responding to your mouse movements. I don't know if that's monitors.
That one's not connected to me.
Okay, so I've got to find a way to get to the Zoom meeting. To get my stuff there. Maybe it's screen 2. Click on screen 2. That's my screen.
Okay, do you want to share your this presentation?
I just want to share the whole screen. Share. All right. Yes. Yeah.
It's kind of shared. Yeah, your screen.
Oh. Second work. All right. Okay.
Go back.
I will let you fix it.
Talk about the ocean if you want.
Yeah, well, that's a picture from Ventura, California. A nice beach scene that I took myself. I thought it was very artistic. It had the sunlight, the sunset, all that good stuff was going. This is gonna work. Excellent, thank you. See, I'm a Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer and technology challenged when it comes to presentation materials. So it's not in presentation mode. Where is it now? Do you know how to fix that?
Full screen.
I don't know how to fix that. Does anyone know how to switch it to the other?
That is your presentation mode for everybody else except for your screen, where you're seeing.
Now, the last time it worked, we didn't have this plugged in. Is that possibly the reason?
Sure. I don't know. Oh, I do.
Oh,
So maybe that's not.
that's the problem.
I have been.
Okay, now I know how to fix it from now.
Okay, great.
I hope
Perfect.
so. All right, let's do this. Exit out of stop share mode. This. Then, share screen. This is really gonna work. I know it this time. Now that is good. All right, so I'm going to minimize this. Or maybe we just go without it. Okay, so hi everyone. Now that we're ready, we're all ready to go. Rob Silverberg, Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer for State and Local Government. I'm also leading our focus on broadband for state and local government for Dell, and a specific focus on wireless broadband and wireless connectivity. I know we have representatives from wireless companies in here. We've got fiber providers. We need to chat, by the way, later.
Started off, so yeah.
And essentially, private wireless is a relatively new thing. A specific band was opened up by the federal government last year. That band was the 3.5 gigahertz band, and it allows our state and local customers, and as well as anyone else, to actually create their own cell hubs, their own private cellular networks. So you've got the typical carriers here that have licensed spectrum that they license from the federal government, from the FCC, T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T. I think some of them were in the room. Yes, no, maybe not. Oh, here we go. Okay. And now there's this new bandwidth that they opened up that's called Citizens Band Radio Services, or CBRS. It's an unlicensed band, meaning anyone can put up a cellular hub and communicate on this band. It's a relatively new thing, and there's been some cities and some counties that are starting to experiment with CBRS. So if you hear the term CBRS, that's what it is. It's an unlicensed spectrum. So think of it like if you go into a hotel and you have Wi-Fi in the hotel. It's the same sort of a thing. You put a cell hub on the top of a building or on a tower, and you can then broadcast your own wireless networks and provide essentially similar services to what you get from T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T. Now, I will say that we're not trying to compete with the telcos and the ISPs, and I know there's a lot of ISPs in the room, it's a better together approach. And as we look at digital divide, and we look at where we have connectivity in the state, where we don't have connectivity in the state, and how we jointly solve the problem, it becomes a partnership between the telcos, the ISPs, and potentially the cities and counties that need to provide that connectivity and the ability to do it very rapidly and easily. Essentially, there's two types of technologies here. There's the LTE, which we're all familiar with. It's on our phone. It works quite well in most areas. There's some dead spots, of course, but in most areas it works well. We have the new 5G coming, which is ultra high speed, ultra low latency. There's a lot of hype around 5G. And it can provide really high-speed connectivity for those that are within that region served by 5G. Just so you know, as you look across the spectrum of dense urban, suburban, and rural, the biggest challenges we have in states like Utah is the rural areas that are not well covered, that are somewhat disconnected. And as we go into a digital divide, digital inequity review, it's often these rural areas that are underserved. There's also in urban areas, some underserved areas as well, just because of geographical limitations where they don't get good signal. Hopefully all of you are in good signal areas. So this is the project that I worked on, started in the fall of 2020 around digital divide in Tucson, Arizona. I don't know if any of you have been to Tucson, but it's a smaller city, and it also has a number of socioeconomic challenges there. There's a lot of people living in poverty, living on the outskirts of the city, many of them living in trailer parks. And definitely when we had the pandemic, they became disconnected from remote work and school. So the city decided they were going to try to solve this. They leveraged CARES Act funding, and they initially looked at Wi-Fi as a way to potentially solve this. And they found that unfortunately the area they were trying to cover was too broad to be easily covered by Wi-Fi. So they had about 70 square miles of disconnected communities. And if they were to deploy Wi-Fi, they would need approximately 20,000 Wi-Fi hotspots. And they declared it impossible to deploy and maintain 20,000 hotspots. And the reason for this is Wi-Fi is a very narrow range. If you have Wi-Fi in your house, you know it doesn't really extend beyond your driveway or into your backyard. It's a very small environment. So we introduced them to Cbrs technology and what's called a cell hub technology. They looked at their demographics and found that they could cover that same 70 square mile area with only 80 cell hubs. So 80 cell hubs versus 20,000 Wi-Fi hotspots. Very big difference in terms of capability, supportability, maintainability. They also found that the speed was truly broadband. For 4G LTE, they could get about approximately 50 megabits in speed, 100 megabit connections in the closer ranges, the 5G area. And we now have proven that we can also do up to about 100 megabit on the 4G LTE signal as well. They also were very concerned about security. So because this network requires a SIM card to access, unlike Wi-Fi, only people who are granted a SIM card by the city could connect to this new network, making it much more secure than a Wi-Fi connection as well. And what they decided to do is they had two criteria for people to connect to this new free city service for connectivity. They had to be below a certain income level, so they weren't taking any subscribers away from the telcos and the ISPs. So low income and disconnected and living in one of the areas that was covered by the new solution. So when they tested it, it was more experimentation to start, but they soon realized that it worked, and it worked very, very well. They went through and deployed Wi-Fi conversion routers to these underserved families, often living in trailer parks and other areas of the city. And that converted the 4G, 5G signal into localized Wi-Fi. So they were able to bring connectivity to those that were disconnected and help solve the digital divide. They received initially over 2,000 applications from families in need of connectivity. And now over 2,000 families are now connected because of this solution in Tucson. They used CARES Act funding, and that was important because they needed a product solution instead of a service, because they couldn't prepay for a service over years. And lastly, I'll say that they're starting to use this new network for two additional purposes. They're leveraging it for city personnel connectivity, and they're also leveraging it for potentially smart city devices, whether that be traffic monitoring, sensors, air quality, those sorts of things. They now have this blanket coverage across the city supporting those devices. I'm going to pause quickly to see if there's any questions before I move on. Questions? Okay, good.
Were you able to put it on existing towers?
That's a great question.
Did you have to cite new infrastructure or anything like that?
Yeah, they wanted to move very quickly because as we all know, CARES was going to expire at the end of the year. At least that's what we were initially told before it was extended. So yes, they wanted to use existing infrastructure. They use city buildings, fire stations, police stations, libraries, anywhere that they could put a cell hub on top of the building that had a fiber connection. So the critical thing to make this work is fiber. You got to have fiber to that location that hosts the cell hub to get that high-speed connectivity. But they did a quick mapping of the city, and I'll show you in a minute. And they looked at all the spots they could potentially put a cell hub on. And each cell hub covers up to a circular mile, potentially, depending on geography. So if they put one here, 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 and here, they could cover potentially half of that 70 square miles with only 40 cell hubs. But yes, they use existing infrastructure, the tops of existing buildings. They didn't build any new infrastructure, no new fiber, and no new poles. So it's just on top of buildings. Great question. Any more? Okay, how does it work? Essentially, the idea is you take a city facility, again, fire station, school, whatever that might be. You put the antenna on the top of that building. What you want is as much height as you can get to get the broadest coverage range without interfering with hills and trees and buildings. And then you get the signal in an indoor gateway in the home. Potentially you can use an outdoor gateway if you have more solid buildings and the signal doesn't penetrate. But it allows you to bring connectivity even out to school buses that are driving around the city on into the families' homes, again, enabling that connectivity. As you start to look to map this out and you look at a region, here's say, 10 square mile region of the city, how are we going to deploy these cell hubs for maximum coverage? You look at where you have city facilities, where you have up to a mile of coverage around those facilities, so you can blanket the entire area in new coverage. The solution is relatively straightforward. You have a data center component with Dell Compute and JMA software. You've got the cell hub or the radio, and then you've got the antenna that goes on top of the building. And then of course you've got the devices. It can be a converter device to convert cell signal into Wi-Fi, or it can be a device that connects directly to the cell signal, like a cell phone, or potentially even a dongle on an existing laptop.
Will you take another question?
Sure, absolutely. Jump on in.
The buildings that you chose, were they ones that you had fiber, your fiber to the building? Or were you able to partner with somebody else that had fiber to the building and then hooked it?
It was existing fiber, either owned or leased by the city.
Okay.
So we didn't buy new fiber, we didn't lay new fiber. The city said, well, we have fiber here that we're paying for, let's leverage that. So great
And
question.
how much of your bandwidth did it take? Did the building still function, or did the buildings need to up the bandwidth inside the building?
I believe that was one of the criteria where they didn't have heavily loaded fiber, so they could segment a portion of the fiber for this, and they didn't want it to cross into city networks, obviously, for security reasons. So they built their own network, leveraging the dark fiber or the fiber that was underused. You're welcome. Okay, so again, in simple form, you've got the software running on servers in the data center. Within 30 miles of that, you can put a cell hub. That cell hub goes on the top of a building, the top of a tower, on a tall tree if you really want to, on a mountain range. I noticed that here in Utah, you've got cell towers up on ridges above the city. So again, if you have a high ridge or rock formation, you can put a cell hub up there. And then you've got the antennas providing the connectivity to the devices. So that's the simple mode. Looking at the different components of technology, you've got 100% software-based, what's called a vRAN, or a virtual RAN, which is radio access node. And what it does is it controls all the communications to and from the radio and the antennas. It's the brains of the system. It's also called something called an evolved packet core, and those cellular people in the room will know what that is, but I don't. Then you deploy your radios around your environment, again, leveraging higher facilities with a broader range of coverage. And then you choose the antennas that best suit that purpose. Some are circular, some are directional. And then of course you want them not to be ugly. So you want a small footprint for a clean look, because not a lot of people want a bunch of cell antennas next to their home that don't look good. So we try to make them less visible and less ugly. Then what you can do is you can expand the network. You can actually run it all from a centralized command and control plane where you've got all the software controls running in the data center. You've got the intelligence of the system running on servers. Then you've got the radios out in the field providing that two-way connectivity to the public. One other thing I will say is that in order for this to function well, you do need to have fiber out to the locations where you're putting those cell hubs, which is why we need to chat with you guys, because we need to partner on these things. Sort of to run through it, this is sort of again what it looks like from a data center point of view. We have the entire stack created, the software where it runs. We've got firewalls that we've integrated from Palo Alto. So it's a fully complete stack that we can deliver to a city, to a county, to a town, to a rural area, set it up for you, deploy it, and give you guys connectivity where you're underserved currently. The way it works, if you look at sort of a Cbrs coverage study, this was a small town in Pennsylvania near State College, if you know where that is. They were looking at where they could get the best connectivity depending on the location they put the cell hub. So this is the Beaver Avenue parking deck, an existing structure that had fiber. There's the coverage that they would get with that deployment, roughly a mile of coverage from that location, given the height and the ability to span from there. The white spots on this were the city's cameras that they're hoping to connect to this new network. These are traffic monitoring cameras that identify incidents with traffic. So all these little white spots were what they were trying to get coverage for their city camera network. Looked at different other options. What if we put it on the parking deck? What if we put it on the Here building at State College? That one looked pretty good because you can get a lot more coverage because it's a much taller building. And then here's the Beaver Avenue and Pooh Street parking deck. So if you're thinking of your city, where you have higher facilities that could support a cellular antenna, could be leveraged. And then the optimal configuration for maximum coverage was 2 cell hubs with a broadcast range of approximately 2 miles. So with just 2 hubs, you get about 2 miles of coverage and the ability to then, again, have those routers distributed to the community that lets people have localized Wi-Fi, or again, a Wi-Fi connectable device. And any questions? Yes.
What software are you modeling that on?
That's a good question. I don't know, but I could find out. If you give me a card, I'll send you the info. There's a number of different software tools that are used to create these models. I don't know specifically which one they used here. Yes.
Tell me, minimum height needed for the antennas. There are certain.
It depends on what's around it. So you want a building that's above most of the other buildings in the area. So there's no minimum height, but the higher up it is above any blockage, then the broader range you get. And I will say there was another thing we did in the planning, which is to eliminate shadows. So if you have potentially a building and then something that's blocking the signal, you want to put a cell hub on one side and a cell hub on the other side to eliminate a shadow. Yes.
How many sectors can you do on a single pole? Like how many radios can you have at the same location?
Well, in this solution, you only need 1 radio. You can have multiple antennas, but that 1 radio powers all the antennas on the pole. I will say that if you look at existing cityscapes, you've got cell hubs from all the major vendors up on the city infrastructure. So as cities are looking at where they're going to permit the AT&Ts and Verizons to put up their infrastructure, often they'll share that with all the providers. You remind me of one other thing though.
So if you do use sectors, then you can put more power and get farther out in that area. Because if you have 1 radio powering all of your antennas,
correct,
you're not going to get as far out as you could with sectorization.
You may know more about this than me, and you're welcome to present, but you're beyond my technical knowledge. But what I'll tell you is that Cbrs, by decree of the government, is a low power. You can't go above a certain power. So yes, the ability to have 1 cell hub and multiple antennas gives you the maximum range, but it has a certain power limit from the SEC. Yes.
So I get that sort of answer. I had 2 questions. First was about like propagation and users, like how many people or how far out does it go? And I think depending on the power, that would kind of determine your propagation, right?
Yeah.
And limitation.
It's up to 1 mile if you have optimal landscape.
So I guess my next question, I think the way this was framed, it made it sound like these were like small cell deployments, and I don't think that's the case, right? These are like macro antennas.
It does both. So the cell hub can communicate in 4G LTE and 5G, And the other thing it can do, it can also broadcast in the licensed spectrum. So if the city was to put one of these cell hubs in an underserved area and wanted to license that to a provider, this can broadcast in licensed band as well.
I guess what I meant is the actual infrastructure isn't like a standalone pole that's like under 30 feet tall. That's like what I would consider a small cell. Like that's kind of what we've seen popping up around Salt Lake and other cities. But this is kind of like a more macro solution where you're actually looking for rooftop locations and other like macro style.
So in Tucson, we use existing facilities rooftops. That's what we did because they had to deploy quickly, rapidly for CARES funds. And they didn't want to lay any new fiber. They just wanted to deploy where they had connectivity currently.
And no city wants to deal with small cell deployment. We know that.
They struggle with it. I will say that in another city in Texas, I don't know if I can name them, but I will, Amarillo, they've decided to put up poles because they didn't have the height of the buildings to actually propagate the signal. So they're gonna put up new poles and they're gonna put these radios on the poles.
That makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. I love the questions. Any more?
Sorry, in Tucson, and then how many people were served?
At the time I did the presentation, which was a couple months ago, it was about 2,000 families. So that's pretty significant.
What was the cost of the deployment? Like how much per family did that cost?
The city provided the coverage for the underserved, low-income folks for free. So there was no cost to the recipient, but in terms of the investment the city made, they invested about $5 million in that first phase for approximately 40 cell hubs. The rough order of magnitude, if you want sort of pricing guidelines, each cell hub is approximately 100K and covers up to a mile. So if you're thinking about a 5 square mile area, you might need 5 cell hubs. You're looking at about $500,000.
Question on the screen.
Yes. Oh,
Go to your chat.
chat. I can do that.
I can read it for you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. How cost effective is Cbrs for rural communities that are spread out and very remote?
Well, good question.
Like 1 house per mile.
We actually have looked at a number of rural communities. One I'm working on is up in Wisconsin right now, where they're looking at where is the optimal placement of cell hubs to get the maximum benefit for that cell hub. They tried using their 911 towers, but their 911 towers were not near any major communities. So by putting one there, they wouldn't really help. So they changed their strategy. Instead of putting it on the 911 towers, they put it on the center of the city building. So they use the center of town, the tallest building in the center of town, they put a cell hub there. So if you use your strategy by putting the cell hub where the population centers are, then you can maximize the value. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's my best attempt.
Yes. Are all of these applications like Tucson where they're locating low income, like your other cities? Are they really targeted to low income households that are?
I will say that for Tucson, it was low income, it was addressing digital divide, digital inequity. As we know, many cities, counties, and states wrestle with digital inequity and digital divide issues. So that's a very big focus, especially for federal funding right now. So if you want to apply for federal funding and you want to apply it for digital divide, digital inequity solutions, you're much more liable to get federal funding for it. Yes.
You said part of the solution is you can limit that access, right?
Correct.
With the router that's out there or whatever.
Right.
You can.
Unlike Wi-Fi, you have to have a SIM card, just like you put a SIM card in your phone or a SIM card in your router. So the city actually issued SIM cards to those people who are going to get the service. Great questions. Anyone else?
So
Yes.
as Dell, were you providing any personal devices, developing personal devices that are SIM?
Dell has devices that can communicate directly to the Cbrs signal, yes. That's not a huge part of our strategy. We're in the competitive world with everybody else, but yes, we have them as well. Yes.
So let me see if I've got it straight.
Okay.
I work with transportation and we look at corridors that don't have any signal on them.
Correct.
We usually try to get DAS, small cells, to come through those sections with it. So this is a separate SIM card that has to be used. So it couldn't be one of the normal carriers that could come through and distribute off of this.
I think I understand the question. If you put this infrastructure in place and it's broadcasting signal out to a certain area of transportation, like a roadway, You have multiple options. You can have, the city obviously owns the infrastructure. They can provide then the SIM cards to recipients, whether that's someone, you know, with a phone driving by, or they can also license that infrastructure to the providers, whether it be AT&T or Verizon or others. They can leverage that same infrastructure for their licensed band. I don't know if I answered that question right.
But you're not roaming on other carriers' networks.
No, correct. However, we do have partnerships with the major telcos. And again, we feel it's a better together approach in looking at digital divide. There are places where AT&T, Verizon, or T-Mobile may have great coverage, great service, great programs for the disconnected communities. We're looking at areas that are underserved, that are not currently connected, and working with the cities and counties to try to bring that connectivity to those regions. Possibly in partnership with the carriers and the ISPs as well. All right, I think I answered all your questions. Yes, no problem.
Do you have any school districts interested in this program?
Yes, we do. Not just school districts, but state departments of education as well. Talking with State Department of Education in Oregon, and we've got 2 school districts that I know of that are starting to pilot it. And by pilot it, they put it up on one school and they test it. They want to make sure it's going to work in that area. So yes, school districts are very interested. I think the first one that's going to move forward is probably Round Rock School District. Kind of happens to be right where Dell is headquartered, but you know, that's just a coincidence, I guess. All right, guys, that's all I had. Thank you very much. If you want to chat more, I'll be around.
Screen sharing and then screen share.
Like a little WAN.
We're good. It's working. Okay, I just want to make, this is just kind of a brief introduction of the emergency broadband benefit. And I know a lot of the providers have been participating in this, and I just wanted to share this information with you, our efforts to support this and to help get the word out to our citizens here in Utah. Interestingly enough, and I will share a little bit about what the results have been, but when we heard about this emergency broadband benefit coming out, the federal program, they, the state leaders, broadband leaders, were challenged with the fact that getting the word out is going to be the biggest challenge in this. And so we were tasked and asked to help with this effort. We put together some media material, we did some emails, and I know the providers, yourselves, have also done a great deal because I've looked at a lot of your websites. So we created a specific local website for people right here in Utah. This has all of the content that you can find at different locations on the federal page, and we put it all together on ours. So you can see right here, there's a question, am I eligible? And then it lists, and there's a link to a place to check your eligibility and then how to apply. So I know many of you saw this, and we had a check the provider participation in Utah, which takes you directly now to their website, which was a little more updated than what we had started with. It wasn't as updated, but they have since. So this list shows all your addresses. Now this has come down and I can't go back. Thing up at the top wants to get in my way. Okay. So then check the service in your area or companies near me. And so we have this link here, it's basically our broadband map. And then we have to go to the emergencybroadband.org to apply. So obviously it tells us first to go to the providers. As I was getting ready for this meeting, I was curious to know how it's been for you as the providers. And I thought about asking a number of you to share what the take has been, the response has been, what you feel about it. And if you want to take a minute and share that, Here in Utah, we've had 14,399 participants, which if you compare that to across the country, we are really low. Which is interesting. I mean, it's not that we're not as low as Wyoming, but their population and Utah's population is significantly different. And I'm not comparing us with California either, state population compared to state population. So the question is are we not getting the word out? Or is this just the Utah mentality? I'm not sure which it is. I don't have a say on that. But as I was started reaching out to providers to ask them about how it's going or what they feel about this program, I reached out to, thought, well, one of our hard hit area with COVID and also the technology crisis is down in San Juan County. And we've heard a lot that's happening down there. We have a few providers. Emory Telecom is down there doing some great things. The school district, the San Juan School District, we've had reports from them, what they've been doing. And another provider that works specifically with the Navajo tribe is Belina and John Champagne. And so I wanted to ask them about how it's gone with this emergency broadband benefit. But he also said, there's so much more that we can share and I'd like to tell the council. And so I've given them a nice chunk of time to talk about this a little bit, about the broadband benefit. And if there's any providers here, I'd love to hear, if we have time during the meeting or afterward, how that's gone for you, but we'll turn the time over to you two.
While we're transitioning, what's the thinking on how long the benefit will be lasting?
Well, I just read an email today from the NDIA, National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and they are proposing additional funding. And I know that they're looking at that. They did say that there definitely is, only so much that will be available for so many months. But if it goes well, then they would continue to fund it. We have an endless hole, apparently. I guess in the federal government. I don't know. You tell me. It scares me. We're going in debt, but
Existing
the
program,
value,
4 to 8 months, that's the best estimate. They
right,
haven't-
unless
I don't
it's
think they've
funded
released the
some more.
last- to give an estimate yet.
And you've got your presentation.
So that's what I was asking,
Yeah.
the guessing.
That's the guess.
Thank
That's
you
the
for the
biggest guess. It's your presentation, right? So I'm gonna exit out of this one, and then I'll toggle it over to yours, and then I'll do the presentation.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. My name is Belina Sosi. I am the General Manager for Choice and Two-Way Wireless. I'm also here with John Champagne, and he'll come up in a few minutes. We're going to tag team on a presentation here. We've got quite a lot of information to share with you all. I know we can't get it all done in 30 minutes, but we'll share as much as we can and what we have on the Navajo Nation. But we do appreciate the time, and we're very thankful for that. The NTUA Wireless is a joint venture created by two companies. The Navajo Tribal Utility Authority, which is a utility company on the Navajo Nation. It's an enterprise of the Navajo Nation. It was developed by the council, and they comprise of serving 27,000 square miles of land, Navajo Nation land, and they are a multi-utility company. ComNet is also another company that's part of the joint venture. They are 49% owner of NTUA Wireless. They specialize in building telecommunication networks in rural areas across the country. All right, so NTUA Wireless, we've been in existence for about 10 years now. We're very young, very new. We're still developing, we're still growing. We have 75 employees, 100% are of the Navajo descent. We're located in Chinle, Arizona. We have an enterprise sales team, we have a retail sales team, we have 6 retail stores located within the NTUA facilities. We also have a mobile team. We have stores about 2 hours apart across the Navajo Nation, so we try to bring a store halfway. We've created the mobile team so families or family members or community members don't have to travel more than 30 minutes to the nearest store, so we created the mobile team. We also have a local call center where we're able to hire people who can speak Navajo. We also have an install and installation team. Our marketing is very local as well. We would try to stay local with the culture, the environment, people in Navajo Nation. We also have a warehouse, a local distributor center on the Navajo Nation. So in June of 2019, we've completed a 170-mile fiber build. This is part of the Apache County Schools Consortium in Arizona. So we created fiber builds on the Navajo Nation and the White Mountain Apache tribe. Recently, we were awarded the Connect America Funds 28.4 million over a 10-year span to serve 7,000 underserved locations across the Navajo Nation. We also received 4.3 million in USF Lifeline Program funding in 2018. So we all know that the pandemic was a tough time for everybody. And on the Navajo Nation, we're very challenged with internet connectivity. So the FCC put out a pledge and challenge to the rest of the carriers, and we opt in. From March of 2020, it kept getting extended from August to October to December. We extended it through the end of January of 2021. The pledge consisted of not terminating any services for families or customers who could not afford the services, who could not pay it. We also waived our service fees as well as our late fees. We're still working with some of those customers today. If they're not able to pay their bill, we continue to work with them. We still have their services on today. So we understand that this pandemic was just not last year, 2020, it continues today. All right. We also created the teacher-student discount program. We offered services to kindergarten students to 12th grade college students and teachers. We took a $60 plan and we discounted it down to $30. We partnered with Microsoft, who offered up $250,000 of their own dollars to help us pay for some of these fees. In addition to that, Navajo United Way also opted in with $20,000. So all in all, we were able to assist 1,100 students and teachers throughout this program. This program consisted of 4 months of free services, where Microsoft or United Way paid for half of the $60 plan, and NTUA Wireless paid for the other half. So we continue that program today. We still, again, pandemic is still out there. Families are still challenged. So NTUA Wireless continues to waive the $30 and the customer only pays the $30 today. We've also applied for a special temporary authorization for 700 megahertz of unused spectrum from AT&T and T-Mobile. So we were able to leverage that infrastructure or that spectrum on the Navajo Nation. We're able to deploy 54 existing sites that helped us with broadband connectivity or capacity. We also installed 600 megahertz overlay in Tuba City, which allowed us for the capacity to be 3 times larger. Tuba City, we have our own little joke on the Navajo Nation. Tuba City is like New York City, city that never sleeps. We go through broadband like crazy there. At the request of the Navajo Nation Council and the Navajo Nation Telecommunications Regulatory Commission, we also deployed a cow cells on wheel in a very small remote community in Lone Mountain. All they have is a set of NHA houses there, school teacher housing, very spread out in the middle of nowhere. They do have a school, a boarding school, and a chapter house. So very desolate, small community. They needed services immediately. We are also awarded on several occasions an IHS service unit with Navajo Inscription House and Kienta. We also help facilities set up their command centers, EMS facilities, Navajo Nation Fire Department, and the Navajo Nation Division of Community Development. We offered free broadband services to their efforts. Here's a media release from the Navajo Times. This is the cow out in Low Mountain. We have an NTUA representative, Larry. We have Shanna, who's with Wireless, myself, delegate, honorable delegate, Kiela Begay, who represents the Low Mountain chapter. A community representative, she works there in the kitchen, and then the Low Mountain administrative worker. In addition to our efforts, we also contributed $20,000, both from NTUA and ComNet, NTUAW and ComNet, to help families, needy families, with food and water. We also packaged them and we delivered them. This is our team delivering it. On this day, we delivered 30 packages. We started at 6 a.m. and we were done like 8 p.m. that night. So we were out delivering packages throughout the day. On the photo on the right, you'll see Jonah and Ashley, our employees, our CSR and our enterprise representative, handing out supplies. As a result, in all our efforts and all that we've done, the 2020 Digital Opportunity Equity Recognition, called the Doers Program, recognized our efforts and what we did for the Navajo Nation. We were awarded that on October 1st of 2020. It was a virtual celebration. You can see me in the middle at the bottom, waving at the camera. Very proud moment for us.
Nice big.
Thank you. As part of CARES, the Navajo Nation was awarded $732 million for CARES Act. The Navajo Nation President, Jonathan Naz, signed into law on August 16th, a legislation that allowed NTUA $32 million to build out broadband services across the Navajo Nation. With this $32 million, we were able to build 4 new towers. And you all know that right-of-way is an issue everywhere. And it's the same for us on the Navajo Nation. These 4 towers, we had the right-of-way completed already. They were ready to be constructed. So we were able to get these done by the end of December of 2020. We also took 102 sites with mid-band spectrum and deployed them. So we use EBS and Cbrs spectrum there. Yep. We also
We can help.
we also built out fiber to Page and Tuba City communities. We also deployed 41 hotspots across the Navajo Nation in schools, fairgrounds, or chapter houses, wherever we could find fiber connectivity. We leverage E-rate internet capacity there. We tried to deploy as many hotspots as possible across the nation to help with students who couldn't afford the internet services or do not have internet services at home. We allowed them, these chapter houses, to open up their facilities and stay open until 6, 7 o'clock in the evening so that students or teachers could come in and do their schoolwork. The E-rate Navajo Nation Consortium is managed by the Navajo Department of Dene Education. It's delivering broadband services to BI-8 grant schools, Head Starts, and the chapter houses. For a very long time, the chapter houses would not qualify or did not qualify as libraries. So in the most recent 2020, they were able to get that status back, that they were deemed to be libraries. So with this project, we are connecting 68 chapter houses or Head Starts connecting them with broadband services. One of the challenges that we face today is right-of-way, and as well as the IT support services across the nation. Unfortunately, Utah is not part of this consortium. we'd like to include them in the future, but as for this project, we do not have them in Utah. Looking ahead, we're looking at ARPA and NTIA tribal broadband, as well as state funding programs that will allow us to build out on the infrastructure that's already existing there. One of our targets that we're focusing on is fiber to the homes. So we've identified 30 housing complexes across the Navajo Nation that will offer 1 gig of services. We have a pilot that's going up right now in the Winter Rock community with the government houses there. So we're working feverishly to get that done so that we can have more studies and understand what we're facing as we get into this program. Several projects identified in Utah. We have fiber to Monument Valley and Navajo Mountain, tower upgrades to Aneth Bluff, Red Mesa, and Mexican Water, fiber bills connecting to Emory Telecom, extending broadband to newly acquired electric distribution areas, and John will explain a little bit about that in the next few slides. Fiber connectivity to new solar projects. We're very interested in working with the state government on local planning as well. EBB, this is a project that's we launched on May 17th of this year. We've done a lot of advertisement to try to get customers onto this program. As you can see, our numbers are broken down there. 549 customers is what we have right now on EBB. One of the efforts that we have out there is the radio. We have the local KTNN and KRQA as part of the radio stations announcing this both in English and in Navajo. We also have posters, signs, billboards. We have social media out there. We've also emailed the local schools. Customers are our E-rate customers. We've also emailed them. So they've been very helpful in getting the information out for us. One of the things that we are also doing is from the student teacher discount program where we've partnered with Microsoft and Navajo United Way. We're taking that list of customers that did not qualify because they were out of coverage or we couldn't get good sign-ons for them. Now that we have EBS or Cbrs, we've upgraded our technology, we're calling those customers back to see if they would qualify for this program or sign up for it. So we're making those efforts today as well. Again, just more information on our mobile team, store within the store. We go out there, set up. We try to get as many customers as we can. Areas that we set up in Utah, Aneth Bluff, Montezuma Creek, Red Mesa, and Mexican Water. We'll go there about twice a week throughout the month. Some of the other items that we do, we give back to our communities as much as we can. One of the 3 major areas that we try to give back is with the Navajo Tribal Utility Scholarship Program. Both AT&I and NTUA will contribute $40,000 total for summer intern students to come work for us. We've hired some of those individuals over the years as they work through this program. We also give back to our community. Photo on the top right, you'll see our enterprise team give out students backpacks to students with items in there. Rock Point Community School is one of our customers for years, and that's why we picked them. The other sponsorship that we have, you may know that the Navajo Nation is huge on basketball, high school basketball. If you've seen the facilities on the Navajo Nation, state-of-the-art facilities, they're great. We also sponsored the Choice Wireless Classic, usually around December of every year. Fortunately, we didn't do it this last year because of COVID. We were looking forward to this year. One of the areas that's near and dear to our hearts is in 2018, NTUA Wireless was instrumental in helping the San Juan County, Utah, to elect the first ever majority Native Navajo County Commissioners. The Navajo Nation Human Rights Commissioner Director of that program came to us and said, hey, we've got some voting sites that we need to set up Wi-Fi on. Could you help us? So we helped with 27 sites across Utah to register individuals, Native voters, and get them registered so that they'd be able to vote. The image on the right is from Navajo Times. This is after the election happened. And as a result, we weren't doing any of this for publicity. We went out there, the event was tomorrow. It happened for a good 3 weeks in a row and we were out there helping. We didn't do it for any publicity. It was just the right thing to do. The word got out and we had an award ceremony. The Competitive Carriers Association recognized us for the efforts that we help in our efforts to help the San Juan County. I went out to Providence, Rhode Island to receive this award on our behalf. All right. John is next.
You can stay on the deck. I'm going to take 2 minutes. She's been talking about N2AW, which is the telecom arm of N2A. N2A is doing 2 really cool things in the state of Arizona on the electric side. I just wanted to mention those briefly. The first one is they're building a solar farm in Red Mesa. Slide down. It's called, so if you look at the Navajo Nation, basically the only part that's in Utah is up here, the northern tip, 27,000 square miles. That's the only district within the utility that's in Utah, just to give you a reference. So I'm only going to be talking about the Red Mesa district. Next slide. This is the power grid that's up in there. If you're familiar, it's north of Kayenta. We have Monument Valley, Navajo Mountain, and then we have Anna Bluff, Montezuma Creek, and Red Mesa. This is the 4 corners right here. So this is your state line. So basically it's this right here is the state. So that was the setup. This is some of the stuff that N2A did with their CARES money. It was not telecom related. I don't want to read it all, but they basically put water in people's homes, electricity in people's homes, set up solar where people are too far from the grid. There's still a lot of people in the Navajo Nation that we talk about broadband. There's people in the nation that don't have water, electricity yet. So when you don't have water, electricity, it's hard to talk about providing people broadband. There's still 110 homes in the state of Utah on the Navajo Nation that do not have power. Next slide. This is all in our deck if you want to read through it. So this is a really cool project. N2A actually had to win a competitive bid with UAMPS, which provides municipal power to 16 municipalities in Utah. And they actually won the competitive bid. They're building the solar farm on the Navajo Nation in the state of Utah. And it's 700 acres. You can read this as 700 acres, 70 megawatts. The president of Navajo Nation signed the paperwork in April to actually start construction. It's going to take about a year to build, late this year to late next year. It's going to employ 300 people to build it. And what's going to happen is N2A is a nonprofit, so they don't talk about earnings. They talk about margins. They're going to actually take their margins, and over the next 5 years, this is the name of the project, they're going to actually put that money back to build power to the homes that don't have electricity. So if you go through it, I have some more information on it. This is the 9 to 12 months, 300 jobs. I think I read the slide in reverse, sorry. So the project's going to be done next year. It's actually starting later this year. And there was a big groundbreaking ceremony with President Ness to sign the paperwork on it. So the next slide talks about, I think one more slide. Yeah, so basically Rocky Mountain Power powered the edge of the Navajo Nation. NTA bought those lines in 2016, and there were 304 homes that didn't have power. Now 194 do. So with that project, the margin from that project, they're going to make the 110 go to zero. So the goal in 5 years is this number is going to be zero. And by bringing power there, we're actually going to bring broadband to the homes when they have power as well. And I think she mentioned another slide. You mentioned Emory Telephone. Emory kind of has some services on the northern edge. We're going to tie some fibers between the two companies. That's going to add a lot of redundancy and diversity in the area. The answer to your question was 7 miles. Cbrs in a rural area needs line of sight. And if you don't get too greedy on the bandwidth and it's not very dense, we have 110 sites of Cbrs. So we're probably considered a subject matter expert in your question. It's about 7 miles. But if you look at our pitiful numbers, we have 10 meg rate plans. 10 megs is better than 0. We had narrowband spectrum, so we were using cellular spectrum, which is never intended to provide broadband. That's why it sucked. So we grabbed a Navajo Nation Cbrs spectrum, which they were awarded, which is 117 megs. It's actually nicer than Cbrs because it's lower in modulation, it's higher powered. And then I'm publicly traded, I own PAL licenses. So his 150 meg, 70 megs of that is licensed. So we have PALs in the 70, and then we have the Tribe ZBS. We put all that together and we were able to come up with a 25 meg plan. So you're like, geez, whoa, you went from 10 to 25. It's like there's 6 people per square mile, 27,000 square miles. So we kind of have a level playing field of 25 megs per home. The FCC right now defines broadband at 25.3, which is painfully low, but we're meeting a very low bar barely. And we're doing 30 fiber to the home. We're doing the engineering for 30 fiber to the homes, and we're looking at getting some ARPA money to actually build those. And the first one we're doing is where the president of the Navajo Nation lives in Winter Rock. So we're actually taking money out of our own pocket to do the first pilot to get understanding of the complexity and the cost and the right of way so that we don't make the mistake 30 times when we ask for the funding later this year. So if you have any questions, I just wanted to throw this out there. We talk about broadband. We're still talking about basic utilities.
Very cool. Nice to see you guys using CBRS technology.
Yeah.
Quick question for you. I've heard a lot of talk about the right of way issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are gaps in tribal lands and that's what causes that right of way issue is the gaps, or is it, what is it that creates that issue?
It's more the complex. The Navajo Nation is very complex, and the land ownership and how they go about giving you right of ways. I don't want to use, I got to be careful. I say it's kind of archaic and it's very procedural. And you could go through a couple. She was being nice about 6 months. Some of the right of way stuff takes 2 years on the nation.
Oh,
yeah.
Is that the allotments that you're talking about?
Yeah, the land acquisitions, the right of way, yes.
Well, even in the not allotted lands, it's also tough. She's talking about there's allotted land, which is pieces of land that are not part of the tribe and they're checkerboarded in New Mexico, which is even worse. But even not allotted lands is still not good. So. And NTA basically put fiber on their utility poles. So they want an ARA grant in 2009, and they were not a telecom utility. They became a telecom utility when they ran fiber on their own poles, when they took the American Recovery Reinvestment Act from the 2008 Obama administration. So that's kind of where that 10 years comes from. It started with some Obama money in 2010. Yeah, yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to commend ComNet on all the work you've been doing. From AT&T's perspective, you've been a great partner and you're so important to providing wireless service in rural communities. So thank you for that.
So I didn't mention AT&T's putting FirstNet on the Navajo Nation, and they're putting I own this much 700 megahertz spectrum. They're putting 2 big fat bands, and they're going to provide public service, but they're opening up the capacity and bandwidth. And because of their investment, we've been able to build fiber to the tower on probably 50 more towers because of some of the investment from FirstNet.
Well, I
Yeah.
thank you for that. FirstNet is so important on the Navajo Nation included, but my question actually is about NNTRC. Is that the correct acronym? Yeah. So I know that they've been having a rulemaking going on about wireless infrastructure. Are you familiar with that at all?
Yes, we are.
So we're very actively engaged on that, and I just wanted to, hear your thoughts on that proceeding, and also to let you know that it's very important, we think, to sort of have the conditions that are already in place, going forward in some form, and not cancel all the contracts, that we might have with the nation going forward, and just hear your thoughts about the proceeding and how that, can relate to broadband deployment on the nation, and maybe some barriers it would create or alleviate from your point of view.
One of the biggest challenges is the Navajo Nation Council. It's very political and I'm sure it's the same anywhere else. But the NNTRC, they regulate us, so we report to them. One of the challenges that we have right now is in the right-of-way process. NTUA and NTUA Wireless, NTUA is an enterprise of the Navajo Nation. So we were formed by the Navajo Nation Council. So there's a lot of policies that do not, apply to NTUA when they're building out infrastructure. For example, fees, additional fees for right-of-way, or even to pay monthly fees on an infrastructure. Those will impact us, and it will impact the consumer, because majority of our sites, we will never get a return on. We have sites and communities that you're lucky to get 20 customers, and that's just not enough to pay for the bills or sustain that site month to month. And those sites were built with funding sources that came from the outside in. So for us to sustain that site, we need a customer base of 100 plus. So if the Navajo Nation is going to assess more fees, we can't pay the additional fees that are going to be assessed. So that's just one example. So we would like to have a bigger voice, I guess, in trying to say how we would like to see things go or rolled out. But right now, there's a lot of conversation between the Office of the President, the Navajo Nation Council, I guess, to see how they want to roll that out.
We're feeling your pain.
Yeah.
So the FCC is in the United States government, the Navajo Nation Tribal Regulatory Commission. The nation's so big, they have their own telecom policy group, and they get inundated with stuff from the council, what they want to see done. And basically the nation lost all their coal plants. So they think about being poor, now being 30% poorer. And they're looking at telecom, all these towers, AT&T's coming in. They're looking at all of the telecom investment, and they're trying to figure out how to regenerate some of their lost revenue. And they're trying to put fees and policies on us. And it's like, I can't give you $12,000 a year for a tower because I'm building it and there's 20 homes. And the only reason I built it is because I got money to build it. So do you want your 20 homes covered? Or do you want $12,000? If you want $12,000, I'm gonna have to take these 25 towers and take service on these people. So they're grappling with the fact that they see there's money to be made, but there's really not money to be made in some of these more, every site we build is a marginal site. We've crossed the line many sites over that aren't making financial sense to build. We're building them because NTUA is a nonprofit utility. If it wouldn't be for NTUA going after the grants and building these sites, we would have crossed, we'd have stopped a long time ago if it was for profit only. So the nation right now is struggling with, how do we get more money out of the telecom space? And they hire fancy consultants that come in, I won't name any of them. And they say, hey, here's what we did in the real world. Here's how we charge in a real city. Let's put this together. And it's like, that is so not relevant to here. So they get it. They get a consultant come in, give them a big, here's what I did, how much money I made here. It's like, this doesn't look like that. And the Navajo Nation doesn't have the telecom resources to realize they're getting told something that's not appropriate. So we're in the same boat as you.
I appreciate your comments.
Yeah. But first, Nat's investment on the nation is huge.
Well, hopefully we can keep it there.
Yeah, we just need to keep it there.
Good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
If anybody has a question, we have 118 of these Cbrs EBS sites in service. So I can't afford your little. I'm putting in some stuff in some marginal areas. I'm not in Tucson, so yeah. But thank you.
Wow, this was really great. Probably even more than I expected. So thank you, Lily, for coming all the way up, and John. And so, what has it been like for you, providers? I know that they're not alone. I know many of you provided free internet, connection during the COVID time, and all should be commended for the efforts that are made. And sometimes building those towers that aren't cost effective. I know many have done that too, just to get the service to the communities, to the people. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about the opportunities for grants. And so we're going to segue now into the federal grants. Some of you providers have been very effective in securing Some of the federal dollars, whether it's Reconnect or the Connect grants. I know some other providers that I've talked to are hesitant to go after for one reason or another. And sometimes primarily the main thing is just the resources. That they're, small providers and we don't have the capability to do that. And so being sensitive to your business models, that's really important because many of you have shareholders and many of you have, your pockets are only so deep and you need to fill those pockets because you have families too, right? And as you're trying to serve families, you have some of your own. But there is a lot of federal dollars right now that seem to be coming, and there's opportunities to reach these households. So we have next, I've asked Jack Walkenhorst from All West, because he has All West Communications, right? I didn't write it all out. Sorry, he has been very successful among other providers in obtaining some of the federal dollars. So I asked for a provider's perspective, Mid-States Consulting, Mike Riley, with an engineering firm. He's a PCVP engineering, and USDA Brad Clausen. He is a regional manager who, as we know, then helps to administer the USDA Reconnect grants. So each of them have, I think, a little something to say, and then we'll keep, Brad is virtual. So Brad, if you want to unmute yourself and if you say something, then hopefully you'll get in presenter mode. We'll be able to see you. And should we have, do you want to go first, Mike?
Please.
And then we'll have,
We took a little vote out in the hall.
Okay, good.
And since it was Jack and I that are here and Brad is not here, he got outvoted. But I brought about 10 copies of my outline that I need to figure out how to shift to. And if you could help me with that, that would be great. Oh, wait, on the machine too. And I brought a little map that shows one thing that we'll get into, and that actually Brad will get into it. Kind of what we have in mind. I'll talk very quickly about a number of the programs that are available. Jack can give, well, and then Brad should talk specifically about what we call Reconnect from the USDA. And then Jack can give the perspective of applying and winning once you win these grants, awards. I see a couple people here that have also.
Is this one yours?
Yes.
Does that look like?
I see a couple people here I know have also won awards. And they're actually getting into the point now where you have to implement and report. But there's a lot of federal money available, or at least there's a lot of federal money talked about. So, like a lot of the things that are going through the government right now through the COVID response and everything else, whether any of this money really ever hits the street or not remains to be seen. It depends on, the overall economy and everything else. But if you look at the programs that are available in rural America, I mean, there's been some excellent discussion of the CARES Act and some of those things that are available. But when you're looking at a longer term grant, the main things we look at right now, we refer to as Reconnect, which Brad will talk about. But also now the NTIA has $288 million earmarked for rural America. But specifically the NTIA program includes a couple of little kind of almost tricky caveats. The applicant has to be a public-private partnership. It has to be some kind of government entity as the lead applicant, and then some kind of service provider. So in some cases that could actually be, an entity, a government entity that's already providing service, or it has to be a private provider. So just to give a little bit of background on some of these things, for many years, people recognized that there was going to have to be subsidies to really provide any kind of broadband to rural America, or even, in the early days, it was to provide power and then telephone to rural America. So since '96, a lot of rural areas were on a plan where if they got approval to build out facilities, they then received essentially their capital expense was returned to them over a period of time, along with around 11% additional to operate that. And people have said, wait, so you spent money and you got more money in return. This is a pretty good deal. But if you look at the way other countries have done this kind of thing, this has been way more efficient than, a PTT trying to provide rural service in some foreign country. But the FCC has tried very hard to shift to a more fixed cost program, which is where our USF, Universal Service Fund programs have really moved now, where instead of this cost plus, they're going to a specific obligation with direct funds. And a company called CostQuest essentially estimated the cost to build fiber to the entire United States. So they've kind of said to a lot of these rural providers, well, here's how much our model says it ought to cost you. Here's what we'll give you over the next 10 years if you meet these obligations. Well, it's just not enough in a lot of areas. It's just not going to work in a lot of areas. So now there's all this grant money being presented. And if we can shift to a little map, if I know how to do that, let's see. There's a lot of windows here.
Sorry.
Not that one. Let's try this one. If you look at this little map, you can kind of see the boundary of Utah there. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I went to the map without going to the screen share.
Okay, this one?
Yeah, this one. If you look at this map, the different colors essentially show some of the different programs or the programs that are already in place to provide some support in these rural areas. And we have another map that maybe we won't get to that shows what's called the RDOF program that is providing a certain amount of federal dollars already into these areas to provide hopefully 25-3 in rural America. But if you want to get some of this grant money for your municipality, for your private company, there is a specific process for each grant program. And it almost always requires some kind of design plan, some kind of analysis of what your area is like right now, and a good story. You need to be able to tell a good story as to why you need this money, how you're going to use this money, how you're going to make this project viable, how you're going to move forward with this project. And then you're going to have to report on what you've done, how you're doing it, how it's going. Right now, just because of one other thing I should mention about the NTIA program, it's geared towards getting the work done in a year. Almost no one is going to be able to start right now and get this work done in a year. For some of the ideas that have been mentioned about rights of way, environmental issues, archaeological issues, but the materials just aren't available. I mean, some kinds of fiber requires more than a year to get delivery, whether the price goes up or not almost. Obviously, the prices are going to go up. But everybody who applies for an NTIA grant is going to have to request more time, I think. Whereas the Reconnect grants and some of these other USDA grants potentially give you 5 years to build out. You need to factor in an efficient time frame for those kinds of things. And some of the people that we helped get grants, or some people actually that we're now helping after they got the grant, they did not have enough money in there to really build out, but they've accepted an obligation and are now going to have to figure out what they can do. So with that kind of lead in, I'll turn some time over to Jack Walkenhorst to talk about what you do to win the grants. What are you now doing to implement those grants and to report on those grants? And I haven't heard from Brad. Brad, do you want to jump in now and talk a little bit about the specifics of USDA Reconnect, or do you want to talk along with Jack, or?
You know, whatever you guys want me to. I obviously I can cover the Reconnect because we're going into round 3. So Reconnect started in 2018. Pretty successful. That's kind of our hot broadband program right now. For round 1, we had 146 applications with 77 awards approved. Round 2 in FY 2020, we had 172 applications with 87 awards. And there is going to be a round 3. So good news, it's coming, and it's coming this fiscal year. So our fiscal year ends September 30th. So it's going to be coming out fairly soon. We've heard August, and we did publish kind of a regulation now, but I can't talk a lot of specifics about what round 3 is going to look like because that is all going to be published in the funding opportunity announcement, or the FOA. So when we announce the next round, which hopefully will be in the next month or two, that FOA will get into a lot of the specifics on the program. We know there's going to be about $1 billion available. So a lot of money, and I guess just something that I would put out is as much money as we have, if you have an eligible application, we really haven't gone to the scoring. So a big factor in doing this is make sure that your application is indeed eligible. We do look at these in great detail. So if you have a proposed funding service area and we go out and find their service in there. And if you have 20 of these areas and we find service in one, the whole application is deemed ineligible. So really dive into them, make sure that it's an eligible application when you submit it. And without seeing that FOA, and I don't get like a sneak peek of anything, so we'll be looking at it at the same time that you see it. If you're interested, you can contact me, or you can just Google RD Reconnect, and there is a link there where you can kind of subscribe to get the latest notification on the program. But expect to see something out in the next, hopefully 30 to 60 days on that. So I'll turn it over to Jack unless there's any other questions.
Thanks, Brad. I know Brad well, but that's the first time I've looked at him. Everything else has been virtual, phone, things like that. So it's good to see you, Brad.
I've seen you as well.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm up here. There's many companies similar to ourselves that could be up here telling their story, but Rebecca asked me, and so I said yes, and so I'm somewhat happy to be up here.
You represent little bits of those green parts up in there.
Yes, we do. All West Communications is headquartered in Camas. It's about 50 miles to the east of here. We serve 4, soon to be 5 counties in northeastern Utah, and then 3 counties in southwest Wyoming. We go as far east as Rock Springs, Green River, Wyoming. The company began in 1912 as a landline telephone company, a group of farmers and ranchers around Randolph and Woodruff. Couldn't get anybody to serve them, and so they got together and built an aerial cable line to Evanston and tied in with one of the regional bell companies there. So that's the starts. The current owner is a grandson of one of the original owners. He owns the company by himself, he and his wife and family, and he has owned the company since the mid-60s. He is still very much involved. I talked to him just this morning as he was calling, what's going on, what's new, what are we doing? And as with a lot of the rural companies, most of the rural companies were in those areas because there's needs in those areas. We've talked about how hard it is to make money in some areas, and you're there because you want to serve the people. You're there because there's a need, and hence that's what brought us to federal grants and federal funding. We had dealt with USDA-RUS through low-cost loans. We've done that, but we hadn't done anything with grants until the Reconnect program started. In late 2018, we started looking at Reconnect 1, enlisted engineering firm consultants to help us. I didn't know what I was getting into. And the further you get into it, the more there is, and you get, okay, things are going okay, but oh man, now what? But we went through the very things that Mike talked about, the very things that Brad talked about. What is an eligible area? If you're doing multiple areas, yeah, you want to look at it carefully and know that what you think is an eligible area is an eligible area. Because just as Brad said, if you have multiple areas and one of them is deemed ineligible, the entire application is deemed ineligible. We put together proposed serving areas. We looked at numbers, we looked at routing, we looked at where is our existing infrastructure, where is our existing network, where does it make sense to go, so that you can serve as many people that are unserved as possible. But once again, we look at any money that we receive and trying to use it the same as we would our own money within the company. Use it wisely, use it well, make it stretch as far as it possibly can. So this was late 2018 as the deadline came, May 31st actually of 2019 for the program that we were applying for, which was the 100% grant program, which is really a 75% grant and a 25% match. And that's a cash match. That's not an in-kind or anything like that. That's a cash match. But I think at about 2:45 Mountain Time, which was 4:45 Eastern Time, on May 31st, I finally got the application in. And that was with the help of a very kind person in DC that could have said, no, my day's done, I'm going home, but she stayed with me and we worked through the last couple of things to get that application submitted right before the deadline. That application, which we were awarded about 5 months later, is for 2 areas in rural Wyoming. It'll be about 80 miles of mainline fiber, and we'll reach about 300 rural homes, farms, and ranches. When you put an application, in the process of putting an application together, you want to get as much buy-in as you can from the community, from the area. We went to various locations within the proposed service area, talked to residents. You know, what do you have? What would you like? Would you be interested if we do something like this? We put together just a brief survey, let them fill it out, sign it if they were interested, and we included about 25 of those with our application. Kind of getting into what also Mike said, if you're going to do this, go into it with eyes wide open. It takes a lot of time to prepare. Fortunately, as I mentioned, our owner and our executive team, they were willing. They said, let's do it. Let's do it right. And it takes time and effort and finance, money, not knowing if you're going to get a return on it. So I just suggest, go into it eyes wide open.
Let me interject, Jack. Yeah. That makes an excellent point there. I mean, there are a bunch of programs out there, and if anybody is looking at probably first NTIA and then reconnect and then potentially state money, the package that you put together, if you're rejected the first time, it might need just a few tweaks to apply to one of these other programs.
Well, and a good point. When Reconnect 2 came about in late 2019, early 2020, I said, okay, let's do this. Reconnect 2 went much smoother for us anyway. There was an original deadline. We met the original deadline. In fact, I was a couple of days early that time. And then they extended it several times because of COVID, but it was really nice to go through all that and know that our application was in and that. So to Mike's point, any work spent putting information together, if you're not successful on one, it's not time and effort wasted for the next one that comes along. Just some other things that go along with that. I mentioned, we did with the Reconnect 1 application, there's some preliminary environmental assessments that need to be done, which gets you started. But once you receive that email or letter that says you're a successful awardee, then the real work begins. And that email came to me early on I think it was a Monday morning in November of 2019. And since that time, with that email announcement award, then you really get into environmental work, archaeological, cultural, and have those you're working with BLM, with BOR, Bureau of Reclamation, Forest Service, anything that you're doing on federal lands.
Jack,
go ahead.
Strata could be the poster child for difficult environmental and
yeah, exactly. We've developed a term that I've used, and I've used in this and other terms, is we're pleasantly persistent with anyone that you're working with. Just keep a smile on your face and just keep upbeat and just be pleasantly persistent. But with Reconnect 1, funds were finally authorized, I think in February or March of 2021. And just about 2 weeks ago, we got our first 515 contract fully approved. from our US, and we have a contractor. This contract's been awarded, and they should start work on the first part of our Reconnect One application shortly.
So you applied for the money more than 2 years ago, and you haven't even broke ground quite yet.
Right.
That's actually unfortunately typical.
Well, you can't break ground anywhere until 100% of the environmental, archaeological permitting is done. We have two, on Reconnect One, we have two totally separate projects. We can do one, it doesn't affect the other one, but until 100% of that is done, you cannot start. The other thing is you spend your money first. And when you get to, that's another thing, well, sorry. Because you're putting cost estimates together 2 to 3 years before you're doing the project. Yeah, think about that. You spend your money, you spend their money, and anything that's left is your money now. That's so, just kind of keep those things in mind. We anticipated those things. We're seeing some of those things. Hopefully it's not too far one way or the other. Question.
Jack, just to clarify, you said any money that's left over is your money. Do you mean any?
No.
Costs?
Cost you, yes. Yeah, not,
you
no.
pay.
If it's under, then, you know, that comes out of grant dollars. It's less grant. Yeah, if it's over, you start putting more money in. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, thank you. I think that's about everything. I guess just in closing, I would encourage, it's a great program. It's a great opportunity. In the second Reconnect grant that we've received, about 100 miles of mainline fiber, about 300 locations that we'll be serving. And these are all locations that don't have high speed right now. They're less than 10.1. When our builds are done, they'll have fiber to the premise and, you know, unlimited options. It'll make a huge difference. Yeah.
A question in the chat from Paul Davis, what speed is considered service?
Well, what speed is considered service? 25.3. But I would doubt that an application that's asking for a network that will provide only 25.3, I doubt that it would be considered. And why would you do it?
To clarify, so from a qualification standpoint, they have to have less than 10.1 to
Right.
qualify.
For round 1 and 2, for round 3, it might go to 25.3.
We'll find that out.
Yeah.
But then the service that you provide has to be 25.3 or higher.
Right.
And I've been thinking about this a lot, having lost to Starlink in an RDOF recently. Going forward, how are there going to be any eligible areas anywhere if they're being served with that 150 meg download? You know, that's
yeah.
We actually have a map that shows the RDOF winners, although I'm not sure. I guess I'd have Rebecca bring it up. But RDOF doesn't cover as much ground as you might think.
Yeah.
But an excellent point. I mean, when we've helped a couple people with their RDOF applications, their short form and their long form. The FCC is getting pretty tough on the wireless providers, the satellite providers. But an awful lot of satellite providers made promises that are just impossible. So I don't know how that's going to come back.
You have to tell me where you
It's
hit
the one
it.
called Caption. It's got a not really well named. Get quite a few windows going here.
I have just way too many.
It just shows a slightly similar map to the one that we had up.
We should have used
Trying to
the data.
capture the RDOF areas.
so future reconnect areas are actually different than what RDOF would have covered, or
The map that I showed, and I've got about 10 copies of it right here. Anybody that's got any RUS USDA money right now will not be eligible in this next round, regardless of the speeds, I think. And Brad might have to jump in on that. We don't know the final rules yet. But yes, if you go look at the areas where an existing provider claims to provide whatever speed, they're going to have to try and show that they can provide better than 25.3. which is in a lot of rural areas, pretty tough to show. But if they can just say, hey, this is what our 477 data says, well, that means we can do it. Well, that's gonna be a tough play. The NTIA is trying much harder to get an accurate broadband map out there. And Rebecca's gonna tell us all about what the state of Utah is gonna do here.
I think I found it.
Okay.
Which one is it?
It's
This one
called
right-
caption.
No,
It's poorly named. Is that the one? That was the previous one?
I guess.
Oh, yeah,
it's-
this one, this
Is
one.
that it?
That's it.
And if I could jump in real quick. USDA is partnered with NTIA and FCC, so we're gonna have a consolidated map between the 3 agencies, so we don't try and have overlapping service.
You know, the question, Brad, yeah, there's enough. That's basically what's not eligible because of RDOF. So it's not much of the state covered by the satellites as far as the RDOF is concerned. And an awful lot of this white area of the state does not have 25.3, partly because there's no people. But probably everything going forward will be on a census block basis. So you really need to get the census blocks overlaid on this, figure out where people are and where they don't have service. And there's a couple of groups, including us, who could help with that.
Well, and I think another thing to go along with that, you know, as we put applications together and we looked at potential areas, I mean, there were a few areas that if you looked at the Utah map, it says, yeah, they're not served. I knew there were small wisps in those areas. I actually called a couple of them because I knew they provided more than 14 or more than 10 meg, but they don't have their information on there.
No 477 data.
Yeah. We purposely didn't apply for those areas. You just do the best you can, try to be upfront and you know, if a question comes, you can honestly say I did or I didn't, or it is served or it's not served.
You know, we've seen very few, sorry, Jack.
No, you're fine.
We've seen very few real partnerships. I mean, the NTIA wants to see a public-private partnership, but if you're going into an area where there's some kind of community WISP or some kind of, you know, government-funded whatever, talk to them. See if there's a way you could partner up on something like that.
Nice. Really good. Any more questions? I've learned a few things. I bet the rest, some of you others have too, besides Paul Davis. Brad, do you have anything else you'd like to share?
No, I did appreciate the comments, and as Jack had mentioned, our environmental has taken longer than we would like, and I guess out west where we do have these federal land managers, it has been a little bit more of a process. We are fortunately going into round 3, and I think we've learned from round 1 and 2, so hopefully round 3 might be smoother. We are sure working on that to try and get these environmentals to go a little quicker. So we are actively looking for some more solutions on that and hiring some more staff. So we appreciate all the round 1 and 2 awardees for bearing with us on that, but you know, appreciate the comments. That's all I have. Thanks.
I have a question for Brad. Brad, the infrastructure bill that's working its way up on the Hill has some money for broadband, and it's rumored that a certain portion of that will go to Reconnect. Would that be a Reconnect 4 in next fiscal year?
You know, nothing has come down to me on that, but you know, we assume that this is going to be an ongoing funded program. So, you know, we're calling it round 1, 2, and now we're on 3, but you know, the assumption is we're going to continue to have a round every year.
Alicia, come here, help me out. So my PowerPoint's right there.
You know, maybe I could jump in while we're getting started.
Do, please, thanks.
We've seen a couple other states really get fired up about this federal money that's now going to fund their state program. Like specifically Alaska, they've been trumpeting this for 3 months now of what they're going to do with this federal money. But you know, it's not just money falling from the sky, and every state will put together a slightly different program for this. So there is a lot of federal money at least being talked about, these programs that are available, and hopefully the state can fill in fill in the gaps.
Have you thought about doing it, getting the president to get us an executive order for the highway right of ways? Just let us come in with, say cat X, I mean, we're doing that when we're tucked in, but BLM has said, gosh, that would sure help us. Just get an executive order while this broadband bill is going on.
The guy who was in charge of all the environmentals for the RUS, Steve Polachek, he told us 3 times, just because it's in the highway right away and they plow it and spray it every single year, doesn't mean it doesn't have endangered species. And we just went,
We're in previously disturbed. We're
Yeah,
2 feet
yeah.
off pavement, we're good.
if you could get an executive order on that, that would be a miracle. But yeah, hopefully someday.
We keep putting it out there, hoping it will osmosis.
Okay,
Doing water.
hopefully this isn't the moment you've all been waiting for. Because I'm feeling extremely vulnerable. I really do appreciate all the presenters and the information that you have, and you are all definitely the experts. I am happy to announce that it went out yesterday. I'm happy, I think. Hopefully you're happy. I'm now the new broadband director for the Utah Broadband Center as of last Thursday. Good, I do appreciate that. So, and I want to remain your friend. And I want you to know, and I believe that we have developed a relationship that that I'm always have a listening ear. So with that said, I'm happy to announce or present to you, hopefully not too high level, but might be somewhat high level, of our broadband grant. So as you all know, the goal is to facilitate broadband access to all Utahns. And this will offset the last mile broadband. So there will be capital expenses in unserved rural areas and unserved areas. Now, take note of those words. I didn't make those up. Those come from statute, okay? And it took me a little digging to find that, but actually it's unserved rural areas and unserved areas.
Underserved.
Excuse me, underserved areas. So there's definitely a way to make this work. The target areas are those areas that are unlikely to receive broadband without grant funding. So this is our list of statutory priorities. And according to the definition, the unserved area that we are using is less than 25.3. Underserved area is less than 120. So these are the order of the scoring that will be done with the applications. This was statute, and so this is a priority list they have given, and so we will be weighing this scoring accordingly. The third score, oh yes, Eric?
I was just gonna, I see a lot of people taking photos. Is it possible to send your slides out to the group?
Yes,
Okay.
but if they want to have it now, go right ahead and take a picture of that, not me. Meaningful, in fact, all the PowerPoints, we get them, put them on our web page. Eventually, sometimes it takes a little while, but we get them there, not too long. So number 3 is meaningful engagement with the impacted community. So this will involve a few things, and the grant program is, I want to read this to you so you are understanding it better than what I can say it myself. The eligible applicant develops, after meaningful engagement with the impacted community, to identify the community's needs and innovative means of providing a public benefit that addresses the community's needs. And that include, as a component of the proposed project, a long-term public benefit to the impacted community developed in response to the eligible applicants' engagement with the community. So like Mike said, and Jack, I believe as well, that it's key to be working with the communities. So the third priority, economically distressed area of the state. So this is based on indices of unemployment, poverty, or population loss. And there's some areas that you can look to determine what that is, or we can as well. for the greatest investment in last mile connections. So we're looking at use of funds considering the number of connections or the economic need in the last mile connections. And the fifth is to provide a higher speed. So we're looking at greater than or equal to 120. And there will be additional points for service greater than or equal to a symmetrical 100, 100. And then number 6, a 25% money match. So that is money match, and there will be higher points or higher priority for a greater match. Okay, are we good? Any questions? Not jumping at me yet, good. Eligible applicants are telecommunications provider or ISP, public-private partnership established for expanding broadband. So a local government entity and one or more private entities collectively who are parties to a public-private partnership that are established for the purpose of expanding affordable broadband access in the state and tribal government. But if you think about it, it's all kind of a public-private partnership, right? So the applicant can be the government entity, but they've got to partner with the provider, or a provider, they've got to partner with the community. So the grant requirements for the applicants, there will be a $7.5 million grant max. Right now, I can tell you that the funding, it was funded for 10 million. But how well it goes, there is funding sitting out there, and we know there's more funding coming. So these were originally state dollars, they're federal dollars that we will be using, and we know that this is a mechanism that'll be to the advantage of the state to have a mechanism to disperse for last mile connection, these federal dollars. One application per grant cycle, and also the applicant that show the impact of available funding. We will be looking at the impact of available funding and matching for federal grants. So when we look at considering what is already, some of you like the reconnect, like you're looking at that, you already have funding for this. If that's a leverage and allows you to do more by adding the state dollars, we're going to look at that. If it's areas that are already covered, we're not going to be duplicating that. But if it's a way to expand what's already there, that will be considered. Also, there's grant dollars that the counties have from economic development. There's other state grant dollars that they can use. So our Office of Rural Development, we have a rural county grant. It's not anywhere near the millions, but there's a few $100,000. And so we can look at, you can partner and leverage state grant funding, or if there's other matching federal grants. And we're looking for a scalable technology will be given priority. Looking to the future, wanting to get the most bang for our buck. If we're going to make the investment, like you said, why put in 25.3 when we can do more? So the grant requirements for the awardees. So after they are awarded, if the applicant is awarded a grant, they will be required to obtain a review of the project application by a professional engineer. So we're going to do this after the fact instead of before the fact. So maybe this will help some of you as you're applying for the grant, that there will be less, maybe not quite so much funds up front. The awarded applicants will have 3 years from the date of award to complete the project, and they'll be paid on a quarterly basis, with the remaining 25% will be held until the project completion. So you won't have to wait until the end to get reimbursed. You can, as you're building it out on a quarterly basis, you can request for those funds. But it'll just be on a quarterly basis. So grant funds are not eligible to fund projects in areas receiving support from the Utah Universal Service Fund. So this is statute. So again, grant funds are not eligible to fund project in areas receiving support from the Utah Universal Public Telecommunications Service Support Fund. Application considerations. Back. Oh. Up. More.
That last bullet, what does that mean to you?
What does that mean to me? What does it mean to you?
Well, that's, I mean, that's one thing we went back and forth with during this session was we weren't sure what that meant.
Okay. I believe what it means is that if you're already receiving funding through a universal service, receive. I think that's the key word, as I've looked at this many
Second to
times.
the last bullet.
Last bullet's the open network requirement.
Publicly accessible will provide public benefit.
Oh. I'm sorry, I didn't see that one. I had something covering my screen. Projects remain publicly accessible and provide public benefit.
Open access.
Is there gonna be like a rulemaking proceeding or are you just like laying?
Well, it's
out
in
the
statute.
rules?
That
Yeah,
one is
I-
in statute,
We
so
were
it
told that
doesn't
would
have to be in rule.
That would be explained more during your rulemaking process.
Right, right. Okay, good question. I'll make a note of that. And we'll get back up to you on that one, but there's a question about this one. Go ahead and tell me a little bit of your, if you feel well or comfortable about that, your back and forth.
Well, we didn't feel comfortable with the open access concept, but we view it as it's providing a public benefit if it's available to the public in that community. You talk about an engagement with the community and whether or not it's going to benefit them or not.
Right.
In the first part of the slide. So.
Okay, and that's a good point.
And certainly some would argue the opposite and say, hey, we're using taxpayer money. This should be an ownership aspect for the public. It should be publicly owned infrastructure. There's two opposite opinions.
Okay,
being
so, okay.
argued here.
Okay, now I think I know where to go with this. So that was part of the reason behind the engagement with the community. And to find out what that public benefit is, the long-term public benefit. If the long-term public benefit, and I don't quote me because I might get shut down, but this is, okay, this is my opinion. The long-term public benefit can be the open access. The long-term public benefit can be a co-working space, or it can be public Wi-Fi available in certain locations, and it can different long, but it must be a long-term public benefit, and this being publicly accessible. I remember having this discussion on the eve of all of this going up, and understanding the fact that you are making an investment yourself. You're making a 25% investment also. And so I believe the legislature understands that, and they understand that concept. And so.
And it's a 25% investment now, but it's an ongoing
And,
investment for these companies going forward. So I would say it's a long-term benefit because we're providing these services for a long term, forever.
You know, the only federal equivalent that I can think of over the past 30 plus years, what used to be called open access was really just any access, whether you had to pay for it or not. I mean, like for long distance calling and things like that. But the other thing that might come into play as compared to some of the federal grants, if you receive a grant, you cannot sell any portion of that network for sometimes 25 years or without federal approval to sell. So there might be a play or a thought in that direction.
Okay. We do have some requirements on, Alicia, the next slides. Oops. Whoa.
There's at least one chat question.
Yeah, the question in the chat is, can county money be used towards the match?
That's a good question. I'll have to get back on that one to clarify on that one. I believe it can be considered. And so I think that's a possibility. So Application considerations, a new project not in progress unless it's an upgrade. Need to be able, you must commit to operate the network for a minimum of 5 years. So I don't have 25, we have 5 years. Number of potential subscribers, so we're wanting to know how many that it will be serving. Provide service at a reasonable cost for 3 years. So we're asking that whatever the price is today will be the same price at least 3 years from now. Current available broadband service, so we're going to just need maps, speed tests, surveys, and document existing infrastructure. Supporting documentation will be map files, design plans, everything that's used to with these federal grant programs. Local government resolution or minutes or a cooperative agreement. So you'll be needing to not only talk to the elected official or the economic development director there, you'll be needing to attend a public meeting, and there needs to be a public notice. We'd like to see that done on a local level. A lot of the states, we were looking at state grant programs and other states, what they were doing, and they have a state level public notice and comment. We would like to keep as much down on the local level as possible. It makes sense if you're working with the local communities. And then a list of stakeholders and partners, proof of projects financing, and budget details, and then a grant form to request, that's a request for confidentiality. So those are just real quick. There's a lot more information. These are just the highlights. That's it. Yes, Eric.
Rebecca, is there a time frame for the grant program to begin? When will applications be?
We are hoping with just the next couple of weeks. That's our goal. We have been told though, since this is going to be something ongoing, you know, we want to make sure we're doing it right. So, I think, yes, sir.
Any adjustment to this plan for smaller grants? Because as a small regional provider, this processing seemed geared towards the bigger companies, and it just seems deflating and difficult to think about doing all of it. Seems like that's going to be a headcount or two that we don't have to apply for a $50,000 or $100,000 grant.
I think if you're working with the local community, you're gonna find that if you've got their support, that they will be good partners in any of this. There's not a minimum for the grant. And so when it comes to maps and things like that, we have a department that you know, we can look to them and see if there's some resources there. We've got our maps that we're going to be using, our own broadband availability maps. We're looking at doing, we don't have the funding yet, but we're looking at doing, you know, speed tests that can be done through a platform that can be done on the local level, like if you're working with the local community. So I don't know, I hope it doesn't seem so overwhelming.
No, it's just, you know, I mean, I think all businesses are going through different things right now. The PPP, EIDL, they're not even checking our taxes now. They're just making a certify that it's correct. It just seems like a lot more red tape. And I think my perception is that
Which tell me which in particular, Bill, is the red tape?
it's going to take more than a half an hour or a half a day for me to apply for a grant. That's what it feels like, more red tape. And I, you know, probably not the right audience for this, but
No, it's fine.
it just feels like, you know, for much bigger companies, these are much bigger dollars, and it needs to be managed, or we're going to fund AT&T and Verizon to do all kinds of stuff, and that's not the intent of the fund.
Right. So what do you do? What do you do though to protect a provider or an incumbent or someone, like if you're going into an area? And so we're looking at, well, how do we protect the person that's already there? You know, how do we verify? And I'm not saying that you have to have all these things. The only things that statutorily is the list, and the other things are in your favor.
Yeah.
But the main thing is if it's an unserved area or underserved. Those are the two things, and that's what we're trying to address.
You know, our biggest example for us in Saratoga Springs is we've got fiber on the way up to the top of Lake Mountain, we'd like to explore getting a grant to continue that project. It's just a project that we haven't been able to prioritize. I would think that it's something that's underserved, and there's people on top of the 15 or to 20 entities on top of Lake Mountain that would love to have our fiber up there. We just can't take it up there.
And it sounds like you've been talking to the community,
Yeah.
and it
we're
sounds
very
like you
plugged
have
into Saratoga
stakeholders.
Springs.
You know, and that's all, is we're just looking for a list of who those are, and the only documentation is basically, let's have minutes of a meeting.
I guess we can move on, but I guess
No,
my
that's
thought,
okay.
my thought is just if there was something below a certain threshold where the process was easier, that may be more beneficial to small companies like us.
You're nodding your head.
Just understand what you're saying. It's a complex process.
The nod goes with the suit, that's just me.
It is. what
As
it is,
Jack
so,
mentioned, it's a
yeah.
complex
I mean,
process.
We're not a big company.
Yeah. Well, you're a much bigger company than ours, based on what you just described.
The other thing is though, is that's part of, part of the process.
Yeah.
And just like she says, it's part of being in business, and it's part of protecting what is there and verifying and things like that. I agree, but it's part of it.
It's gonna be an ongoing program, though. I could see you, if you get squeezed out in the first year, maybe the next year you could roll right into it, but that puts you another year out, obviously. That's an interesting idea, up over the mountain. You could tell a good story behind that.
Yeah.
Okay, any more questions? If not, oh, Tara.
So I'm just, I think during the legislative process, my understanding, and maybe I didn't understand, was that the Go Utah office, your office, would specifically have some sort of rulemaking that would better define the terms and sort of go through the process.
Is that what this is? Or-
Is there not gonna be that opportunity, or are we just gonna like roll right into it? I just
No,
wanna make sure I
they're going to be
understand.
posting the rules. I talked to him just this morning, and they'll be posting the rules, but as far as there being a lot more rules, there's not.
No, I'm not saying like making more rules. I'm saying, I think during the legislative process, many of the stakeholders understood that there would be some sort of rules posted with opportunity to comment before the rules were finalized, similar to like the Public Service Commission process where you do proposed rules.
Yeah, and that's required. And I think he's about ready to post it. He's sending it to the executive director today, those rules.
Okay, I'm not trying to make this adversarial. I'm just asking sincerely so I
no.
understand the process, because
Yeah.
I'm still not clear about the timing for the rules, or if they're posted and where they're posted and what we do.
So what he does is he looks at what is written based on the statute, and if there's anything specific that's not outlined in statute, then he puts that in the rules.
Because there were specific things in the bill that said this will be decided in rulemaking. And who's
The main
he?
one is the one about the Public Service Commission, that Universal Service Fund. That's one of the main things. There's not a lot in the rules.
So where will the rules be posted?
I would have to find that out for you, because I don't do that.
Don't you let us
Who
know?
is doing it?
Okay.
Rebecca, just for clarification, so based on this conversation, is it through the administrative rules process? And if so, typically there's a 30-day public comment period. That maybe would be my question, is that is that the rules process that GOED would be moving forward with, or is it some other rulemaking procedure?
They have to follow that procedure based on statute and based on the code before they make it code. If that needs to be posted for 30 days before we roll this out, I would have to find that out for sure. I haven't been told that was necessary.
Maybe our former good legislator here can clarify, is it a 30-day public comment period typically for administrative rules review?
Yeah.
Right, but I don't know if that's preventing us from being able to launch the grant program.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, one more question. This is like actually creating more questions than it is answering things. Because this says exactly what's in the bill, right? This like is exactly what was in HB 348, is that right? Yeah. So who is going to be making the decisions on the grants and the prioritization?
Oh, yeah, we have a reviewing committee. Sorry, meant to mention that. So they're primarily departments of the state. So we have the Department of, let me find my whole list so I can tell it to you exactly right. I will try to do it off the top of my head. So we've got UETN, UDOT, Public Service Commission, Public Utilities, Department of Technology Services, the Utah Geospatial Referencing Center. We have the Utah League of Cities and Towns, the Utah Association of Counties, and our digital access individual education commission. So we have people who have the expertise in and have worked with the providers and have, and we also will be relying on engineering and other services. We will not be doing this alone without that expertise. You guys are so quiet. I know that's not a good sign. So, no, it's not. Not in this meeting, it's not a good sign.
Can I ask one more question? Sure. Sorry, so just going, oh, you closed your computer. The first part, when you had the numbered list of the priorities you're gonna look at, are they in order? So unserved and underserved?
It's in that order.
Okay.
That is the order, that list, the priority list.
So you get more points for the top going down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sorry, and I guess I do have one more. So you said 10 million, but there's more out there.
Hopefully, there's more available. Like if we
Like,
don't run this
following-
program very well, then they might end up giving it all to Lynn. But I personally would like to see a lot of this get to the last mile. I want to see a lot of it go to UDOT, definitely. But I'd like to see a lot of it go to these last mile connections that there's no other way that they're going to be served without a grant program. Kelly.
Yeah, because my understanding was to go and get ARPA money for broadband and does that get supplement this? That was kind of the question.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Didn't go and get some broadband ARPA money and was that going to supplement this, like the 10 million and stuff?
You know, I haven't been given the details. I'm not high enough up on the ladder, but what I understand that this was state funded and then now they flipped it and they're given the federal dollars.
Okay,
And
and there
there's
potentially was ARPA if there were more.
Right, as much as there is. And if we can set up a good mechanism to receive those funds, then we can get more for this. If other states do a better job of it than us, then they're going to get those funds. And so that's what we want to do is we want to build a good mechanism.
So were there ARPA funds that went directly to go up for broadband? I thought there were ARPA funds already.
They say broadband, but they also say infrastructure. So it's not just broadband, but we designated it broadband. And UDOT did get a lot. They got a lot more.
I was told it has to go back to. For them to go back. They're hoping this special session maybe. So it's not a done deal. It's like budget items.
You may have mentioned this, and I apologize if you did. Do you anticipate that the state with the mapping resources that you have, you will try to identify?
Hey, there's no dessert.
This was dessert.
Okay.
Yeah.